Whispers of rebellion against our own creations first stirred when the worms were still confined to the labs. I was only a young recruit then, one of many assigned to guard the desert's periphery. We all knew something about the experiments massive creatures engineered for warfare, grown in hermetic chambers, tested on everything from small rodents to actual battlefield scenarios. The outpost leadership insisted these worms would be the key to winning remote conflicts without risking human lives. We believed it. We wanted to believe it. But the day came when they set those creatures loose in controlled trials along the dunes, and the desert churned beneath them like a roaring sea. That was the first hint that, despite all our arrogance, we had miscalculated the extent of their hunger and might. I still recall the shimmering heat waves on the horizon as those beasts were escorted from steel enclosures, each one the length of a city block. Their skin was thick, segmented in slate-gray hues that glistened beneath the scorching sun. Rows of ridges spiraled down their massive forms, funneling sand and dust off their sides like streams of water would run down a stone pillar. Even from afar we could see the telltale glimmer of reinforcements placed upon their hides, metal plates welded onto their tough exterior, meant to protect critical zones. The scientists had boasted that these enhancements could deflect projectile weaponry. We saw bullet casings bounce awkwardly off their plated sections, tumbling uselessly into the sand. We were told that once they finished perfecting the worm's obedience, everything would change. They envisioned entire armies replaced by these creatures, monstrous mobile fortresses that only followed our commands. If an enemy hid underground, the worms would dig them out. If a fortress lay behind a thick wall, the worms would shatter it. All we had to do was to refine the hormone signals that controlled their brains. I remember watching the lead scientists inject the beasts with luminescent liquids, hooking them to transmitter collars, and adjusting frequencies on handheld devices. The worms writhed, the sandy ground rippled, but the scientists smiled like triumphant conquerors. They believed they had harnessed nature's fury and molded it to our will. Little by little, the worms' aggression began to escalate. Reports of them thrashing unpredictably grew more frequent. Their first assigned caretaker disappeared one morning, leaving behind only scraps of blood-stained cloth. Higher-ups claimed it was an accident, pinned the blame on the caretaker's own negligence. Hordes of rumor and fear spread among the outpost guards. We were forced to keep watch with newly developed flame rifles, yet we were never told why conventional firearms wouldn't suffice. If we ever asked, we got only vague warnings about the worms' impervious armor and thick hides, which suggested typical rounds might only anger them. And that was the word used by every trainer in hushed whispers. Anger. There was no talk of fear, no mention of caution, only references to their bottomless capacity for rage. Even so, training continued. The outpost's main yard turned into a testing ground. We fed them large lumps of processed protein, scraps from genetically engineered animals, and even the occasional captured predator from the desert beyond. The worms responded initially like well-trained dogs, ripping apart targets at set coordinates. Their speed was terrifying. A single worm, moving as one violent surge beneath the sand, could cross 50 meters in seconds, devour its target, and retreat beneath the dunes all in one fluid motion. The method for controlling them was newly streamlined, a specialized device worn on the operator's wrist, designed to emit a subsonic frequency that compelled their compliance. Press the green button, and they'd surface. Press the red one, and they'd descend. Another dial on the side adjusted aggression levels. So simple on paper. Things went horribly wrong 2 nights later. During a routine trial, we heard alarms shatter the stillness of the desert. The control tower's klaxon blared as watch lights swept the perimeter. I grabbed my gear and sprinted to the yard, joined by dozens of other panicked soldiers. The device that was meant to keep them contained had malfunctioned. Energy surges from a freak sandstorm overloaded the frequency modulators, and the necessary signals flickered on and off like dying flames. Freed from their artificial commands, 2 adult worms crashed through steel barriers with a rage so volcanic it shook the entire outpost. We fired lasers, bullets, flame rifles, but the desert trembled as the beasts turned the yard into a bloodbath. Several handlers, pinned beneath sudden collapses of corrugated metal, disappeared in the swirl of sand. By dawn, we had lost half the security staff and one of the main labs lay in ruins. Word of the breach spread to surrounding human settlements like lightning. Panic churned through the rumor mill, transforming each retelling of the story into a fable of unstoppable godlike creatures. Smaller outposts evacuated personnel or scrambled to reinforce their walls. Civilian caravans reported sightings of monstrous worms on the move, some half submerged in sand, others traveling dangerously close to once safe trade routes. We tried to mount a counteroffensive, but for every plan we devised, the worms' primal cunning outmaneuvered us. We discovered they had begun to reproduce unexpectedly. We had never factored in their ability to self-clone or cross-breed in the wild, yet nature found a way, whether we approved of it or not. Day after day, we lost contact with outposts to the east. The last communique we received from Oasis Station Bravo was a garbled transmission. "They've come, unstoppable, entire dunes vibrating, no refuge, watch the..." Then static. Intel suggested that the worms could sense seismic vibrations from miles away. Even the slow hum of a generator could lure them. As if that wasn't bad enough, each worm's appetite for resources was insatiable. Any structure above or below ground was vulnerable, with reinforced concrete offering little resistance compared to their steel jaws. Our war machines, ironically, could do nothing to quell the monsters we had made. It was catastrophic. A man-made apocalypse that we unleashed in the name of innovating warfare. There was talk of an evacuation, moving deeper into the wastelands on the other side of the continent, where dunes turned into rocky highlands. Our top brass pinned their hopes on reaching the mountainous regions that even the biggest worms would struggle to traverse. The exodus began at dusk. Trucks and armored convoys roared across shifting sands, staggered in columns that stretched for miles. I rode in one of the rearguard vehicles, scanning through battered windows for any indication of worm-like shapes. Clouds of dust rose from the caravan, forming a beacon so large that it might as well have been an open invitation to our creations. When darkness fell, we killed the headlights to minimize our seismic presence, but we all knew it was a matter of time before something found us. Flares shot up from the front of the caravan, painting the sky in harsh red arcs. A monstrous silhouette erupted from beneath the dunes, swallowing an entire transport in one savage lunge. The worm's body glistened in the crimson glow, irregular plates of metal from its original modifications reflecting the burning flares. Screams echoed across the desert. Our commander ordered immediate dispersion. Trucks veered off in every direction, but I could see the dune behind us swelling. My stomach tightened as I realized a second worm was converging on our position. I jumped from the rearguard vehicle, shouting for everyone to run. Some clutched flamethrowers. Others scrambled to remodulate the handheld control devices, hoping a miracle could revert the worm's programming. Nothing worked. The ground convulsed beneath our feet as the worm tore through the caravan. A streak of fire from a flamethrower momentarily illuminated its face, two giant mandibles lined with rows of rotating teeth. It had grown even larger than the ones I'd seen in the yard. The genetically implanted armor plates were partially fused to its hide, merging man-made metal with living flesh. I felt as if we were fighting a demon forged in the fires of our own hubris. All sense of order vanished. Soldiers fled in scattered groups, carrying the wounded or yelling for backup that would never arrive. Some vehicles drove off into the night, vanishing behind swirling curtains of dust, unwilling or unable to rally. In the chaos, I found Alora, a lieutenant from the lab security detail. She had remnants of her uniform torn from a near brush with the worm's jaws, exposing a makeshift bandage around her forearm. Her eyes were wide with adrenaline. Together we managed to gather a small handful of survivors, those either too stubborn or too loyal to leave us behind. Our plan was to trek on foot toward a distant ridge, where radar scans once indicated a network of underground bunkers. It was our only chance for cover in the face of these unstoppable terrors. The journey was brutal. Blistering winds whipped tiny granules of sand against our skin, wearing down exposed flesh. We conserved water like misers, rationing even single gulps. Each time we so much as coughed, we feared the worms might sense our vibrations. Night after night, we trudged under a moonlit sky, pausing whenever we felt tremors in the sand. I couldn't help but replay in my mind the images of that monstrous worm looming over our convoy. Were the others from the lab still alive somewhere in the desert, or had they been devoured, their bones ground to dust beneath those dreadful mandibles? What unsettled me most was the possibility that we had only witnessed the first wave. If the worms were truly reproducing at a rapid rate, countless baby worms could be stirring underground, swelling in size with each passing day. The desert was no longer a home to scattered pockets of humans. It was a feeding ground. Our footsteps felt like shallow echoes of a once mighty civilization. Every rumor we heard confirmed the same horrific pattern. People were being hunted, outposts destroyed, and entire blocks of desert territory turned into worm-breeding nests. We had come so far from the delusion that these creatures would be our obedient war machines, and now they reigned supreme. Finally, we reached the ridge at dawn one morning. Crimson sunlight spilled over a jagged expanse of rock formations, their edges carved by centuries of sand-laden wind. Nestled within the rocky walls, we found a half-collapsed bunker entrance. Rusted steel doors hung ajar, half buried by drifting mounds of sand. Our small group carefully pried them open, hearts pounding with the dread that something might already have taken residence within. Dim, stale air greeted us as we stepped inside. Emergency panels flickered in uncertain bursts, powered by the bunker's failing solar reserve. Better than nothing, we told ourselves. We secured the doors and huddled in the main corridor, taking stock of our supplies. There were 8 of us left. Myself, Alora, 2 other security officers named Flynn and Ramos, and 4 civilians who had been part of the caravan's maintenance crew. In the darkness of that bunker, we tried to stoke a faint sense of hope. Maybe we could repair the sealed compartments, scavenge water from beneath the crust, and create a haven while the worms might occasionally roam the rocky perimeter. Our hope was that they'd find tunneling in this terrain more difficult. Time would tell if that was true. There was an operations room at the corridor's end, still functional enough for scanning the immediate desert, if we could power up a few terminals. It took 4 hours of welding and resurming cables to restore partial electricity, but the grainy display lit up, revealing a swirling dust storm that hovered just outside our rocky sanctuary. The relief of finding temporary shelter was soon overshadowed by the knowledge that we were once again pinned. The worms roamed outside, and any attempt to expand or search for help would risk exposure. Despite that, our first order of business was to re-establish contact with someone. An old radio beacon was found in the supply closet, missing parts, but still salvageable, we hoped. Flynn and Ramos began tinkering with it, cursing the rusted components. Meanwhile, Alora and I formed a small scouting team to survey the bunker's perimeter, making sure there were no alternate entrances. Dust-laden footprints littered some vacant chambers, but no recent signs of life beyond our own. The place was built decades ago, from a time when conflicts in this region were about warring clans, not colossal abominations. At around midnight, we heard the first deep rumble from outside. It was a low, echoing vibration that rattled loose gravel from the ceiling. Instinctively, we cut the lights and leaned in tense silence against the cold bunker walls, weapons clutched in clammy hands. For a moment, we thought the worm might pass by, but then we felt the crash of its body slamming against the rocky outcropping overhead. Dust rained down on us, and I swore I could smell the stench of that creature through the cracks, an oily, metallic odor reminiscent of overheated machinery. It roared, and the walls vibrated with a deafening hum. Biting my tongue, I motioned for everyone to stay quiet. My mind raced. Could the worm detect us inside these rocks? Would one more shift of the mountain cause a cave-in? The moments dragged on, hearts hammering in our chests. Then, gradually, the tremors subsided. We heard distant grinding, the sound of the worm scraping its hide along stone, searching for a pathway into our sanctuary. Mercifully, it seemed the terrain was working in our favor. Like a frustrated predator, the creature gave one last quake-inducing thrash before sliding away. We breathed cautious sighs of relief. Although we survived the night, it was clear that time was working against us. The bunker's water supply would not last forever, Power levels were dropping by the hour. The solar panels above were choked by layers of sand and dust, making recharging minimal at best. We needed a plan not just for survival, but for reclaiming the surface, or at least finding a route to safer land. But where? All known outposts had fallen silent. Rumors spoke of a massive mountain fortress beyond the horizon, but no verified reports had come in. Still, that faint possibility loomed large in our minds. If it existed, it might be the last stronghold. Over the following days, we carefully studied the topography data stored in the bunker's archives. Concealed among outdated war maps, we found references to a network of canyons that stretched for hundreds of miles, linking foothills to higher glaciers. If we could traverse that canyon system, hugging the rocky floor, perhaps we'd remain beyond the worm's sensitivity range. It wasn't a guarantee. We had no illusions of an easy trek, but desperation fueled our resolve. The alternative, waiting in the bunker, hoping to run out the clock, grew less viable with each passing hour. We prepared by gathering every scrap of ration, every salvageable tool, and rigging a portable frequency modulator from the leftover radio parts. The idea came from Alora, who believed that if we could get close enough to one of the worms, perhaps we could override its aggression, at least momentarily. It was a dangerous gamble, but it might buy us precious time if we encountered a lone scout worm en route. In the worst case, the device could be strapped to an explosive trap, luring the worm away from us. I saw the fear in each pair of eyes. None of us wanted to face these monstrosities again. Our nightmares were flooded with visions of devouring maws, yet the only way out seemed forward. At dawn, we emerged from the bunker into a world of blazing light and solitude. Sand had shifted half the night's storm into drifts, partially burying our exit. We overcame it with hand shovels and sheer will. Ramos led the group, scanning the horizon with binoculars, alert for any sign of rippling dunes. A vast emptiness spread out before us, tinted golden by the rising sun. The terrain was rocky enough to give us a foothold, and we started down the slope, hearts pounding. Every step felt like a betrayal of the quiet desert. After hours of cautious marching, we reached the entrance of the canyon path. The walls rose around us in towering slabs of sandstone. The temperature dropped in this sun-sheltered corridor, and for a fleeting moment we felt relieved by the respite from the stifling heat. Our footfalls echoed on the worn canyon floor, accompanied only by the distant whisper of wind through narrow chasms. The place felt deserted. Alora took point, scanning for any sign of cracks large enough for a worm to slip through. Meanwhile, Flynn and the civilians carried the modulator device, angled to pick up subtle vibrations. If the worms approached, we wanted as much warning as possible. Halfway through the canyon, we felt it, a faint tremor beneath our boots. We held our breath, crouching close to the canyon walls. A deeper rumble followed, echoing along the rocky corridor. To our horror, the modulator device shrieked softly, indicating the ground started to vibrate in waves, not from an adult worm, but from something smaller. Or perhaps younger? My gut clenched. We had heard rumors of juvenile worms ones that were lesser in size but just as deadly. Then came the hiss and the grinding of rock as a serpentine shape burst through a fissure in the canyon floor. It was easily the size of a small vehicle, writhing with fresh vitality. Its armored segments covered in a dull sheen. It lunged forward, mouth thrashing. We scattered, diving behind boulders. Flynn frantically toggled the modulator. A shrill frequency pulsed, making my teeth rattle. The young worm froze mid-lunge. It jerked its mandibles in confusion, as though hearing a familiar but garbled command. Seizing the moment, Alora unleashed a concentrated burst from her flamethrower directly into the creature's face. The worm screeched, flailing in agony. Its flesh sizzled where the flames scorched metal and hide alike. 2 more blasts, and the worm convulsed, retreating in blind pain back into its hole. The ground rumbled violently, sending chunks of rock tumbling from the canyon walls. Then it was gone, leaving a scar on the canyon floor and the stench of burnt chitin in the air. Shaken but alive, we pressed on, conscious that we had likely alerted the entire desert to our presence. Every step felt heavier with the knowledge that bigger throats might now be gunning for us. As afternoon folded into night, we found a sheltered alcove within the canyon to make a temporary camp. No one slept well. Vision blurred with fatigue, and minds raced with the memory of the worm's shrieking retort. We heard subtle quakes in the distance, maybe a sign the older colossals were responding. We prayed the canyon walls would shield us. For the first time in my life, I caught myself wishing for good old-fashioned human warfare, with bullet volleys and mortar shells. Anything seemed better than this primal, unstoppable menace. By dawn, the tremors had grown sporadic, so we risked another day's march. The canyon began sloping upward. Rocky slopes gave way to scattered boulders and thorny scrub brush. The modulator flicked on and off with interference, hinting at better prospects for safe passage as the ground turned sturdier. But our water canisters were nearly empty, and the group was running on sheer determination. Then we saw it. A metal observation tower perched on a stone plateau in the distance. It looked battered, but intact enough to be the remnant of a forward scouting site. With renewed vigor, we climbed toward it, each footstep echoing the last reserves of our energy. At the tower's base, broken solar panels lay scattered in a twisted heap. The entrance hatch was jammed with debris. We cleared it away, hearts pounding with the hope of securing supplies or even a working communication device. Inside, we found an abandoned control room, caked with dust and rust, consoles half ripped from the walls. Evidence of a hurried evacuation was everywhere. Papers strewn about, half-eaten rations rotted in the corner. One intact console blinked weakly. Remarkably, it seemed connected to a short-range transmitter. Flynn sprinted to it, rummaging through the scattered electronics in search of spare parts. If we could get a message out to any remaining outpost or settlement, a new lifeline might emerge. We heard a grinding groan from overhead as the tower swayed in a sudden gust of wind. My guts clenched. Any large vibration made us wary of the worms. Alora looked up, scanning the horizon. No immediate sign of movement. We worked quickly, guided by desperation. Ramos patched wires into the console while I fiddled with the power feed. Sparks flew, but the panel lit up. Flynn activated a short-range broadcast protocol. Static hissed through the speakers. The five of us waited, hearts pounding in the dim control room, straining to discern any human response. Then, cutting through the static, came a faint voice. "This is the mountainous stronghold, Sector Delta. Who's out there?" "Over." A wave of relief and disbelief washed over us. Words caught in our throats. Alora grabbed the microphone. "We have survivors. 8 of us. Worm outbreak in the desert. We need immediate—" She paused, searching for the right words. "We need a safe harbor." The speaker crackled again. "Coordinates received. Lost contact with the wide desert region. The route is treacherous. Proceed with caution and keep your transmitter on. We'll guide you to a secure pass along the high ridges." For the first time in days, we felt a glimmer of genuine hope. There was a place out there, still holding out against the onslaught. We were not alone. We'd have to brave whatever the desert threw at us in order to reach them. But at least we had a destination, a beacon of safety shimmering on the horizon of our shattered world. We knew the worms were out there, patrolling sands they considered their birthright, hunting with a fury that no force on Earth seemed capable of fully taming. Yet, we also understood that survival meant facing them head-on. We had unleashed these beasts, and we would pay the price of crossing the desert one more time. But at least now, we believed we could make it. At least now, there was a promise, a small one, that humanity might still carve a future from the ashes of its mistakes. With renewed conviction, we gathered our meager supplies, checked our weapons, and stepped beyond the battered tower. High above, the cloudless sky stretched in a pale swath of blue infinity. Ahead lay the journey. Behind lurked the nightmares we had created. If we could outrun them, if we could find that fortress in the mountains, perhaps we could live to tell the tale of our greatest sin, and hopefully to begin the slow, painstaking path of redemption.